I helped my sister-in-law through her divorce, then she tried to seduce me and publicly accused me when I said no. My wife believed her. I need to get this off my chest because I'm still trying to wrap my head around how everything spiraled so quickly. I honestly can't believe how my own wife turned against me, all because I tried to be there for her sister during a rough patch. Dana, my wife, has a younger sister named Jessica. She's always been a little dramatic, but I never really had an issue with her. She mostly kept to herself, and we'd only see her at family gatherings where she'd drink too much wine and vent about whichever guy she was dating that month. About 4 years ago, Jessica married a guy named Mark. He seemed like a solid dude, steady job at some insurance company, treated her decently as far as I could tell. But Jessica was constantly picking him apart. Dana used to roll her eyes and say, "That's just how Jessica is." She'd always find something wrong, either Mark worked too much, didn't take her out to fancy dinners often enough, or spent his weekends glued to the TV watching sports. Dana would listen to her, nod, and then later tell me Jessica had totally unrealistic ideas about marriage. I stayed out of it because, well, it was sister stuff, and I didn't think it was my place to get involved. But even I could tell Dana was starting to get worn down from always being Jessica's emotional dumping ground. Then, around 8 months ago, Jessica called Dana late at night around 11 p.m. in full-blown tears. Mark had apparently asked for a divorce, and she claimed she never saw it coming. Dana and I both knew things had been rocky between them for a while. Jessica was constantly posting those vague, guilt-trippy messages on Facebook, like how being married to someone who doesn't appreciate you is soul-crushing. Dana would show me the posts, and we'd just shake our heads. Her Facebook was basically a highlight reel of cryptic jabs, stuff like, "Some people won't realize what they had until it's gone." It was pretty obvious to everyone that she was talking about Mark, and Dana was always mortified that their whole extended family could see it. That night on the phone, Jessica was completely falling apart. She kept saying she had nowhere to go because Mark wanted to keep the house, and her part-time job barely covered anything. She'd always been bad with money and relied heavily on Mark to cover their living expenses. Now that she was on her own, the idea of supporting herself seemed to completely unnerve her. She even said she might have to live in her car. Dana didn't hesitate. She immediately told Jessica she could stay with us for a few weeks until she figured things out. I agreed. I figured she just needed some time to regroup, and that it wouldn't be long. Dana's always been tight with her family, and I knew helping her sister would mean a lot to her. So, I told her Jessica could use the guest room for as long as it took to get back on her feet. Honestly, I thought the space might help Jessica reflect on what went wrong and maybe even patch things up with Mark. But Dana told me it was definitely over. Jessica said Mark already had a lawyer involved. Jessica moved in the following weekend with just a few suitcases and a tearful story about how Mark had changed the locks and wouldn't let her back in to get her stuff. It sounded extreme, but I didn't want to wade into their mess. I just helped her carry her things upstairs and told her to settle in. Dana took the whole week off work to help Jessica look for an apartment and a divorce lawyer. She was basically glued to her side, playing emotional lifeline while Jessica cried and binge-watched TV. I kept up with my regular work schedule because someone had to bring in money, and frankly, Dana's always been the better one at dealing with emotional stuff anyway. Jessica clearly preferred talking to her sister about all the personal things in her marriage, and that was fine with me. The first couple of weeks weren't too bad. Dana did most of the heavy lifting emotionally, and I just nodded politely when Jessica vented at dinner. But Dana had to go back to work eventually. She'd already stretched her time off, and her boss was starting to lose patience. She's always been a committed worker, so using up vacation days on family drama wasn't exactly ideal. Since I work from home, I was around during the day, and that's when Jessica started turning to me more. If Dana was busy, Jessica would knock on my office door and ask if I had a few minutes to talk. Sometimes she said she was having a panic attack, other times, it was bad news from her lawyer. And I felt for her, she was clearly overwhelmed. I'd pause what I was doing and sit with her in the living room while she unloaded about whatever new issue had popped up. She'd tell me things like Mark's lawyer claiming she wasn't entitled to half their savings since she didn't contribute financially, or that Mark was making it hard for her to collect her personal stuff from the house. After our chats, she'd always thank me and say I was the only one who truly understood what she was going through. I assumed she was just expressing gratitude for having someone who listened. This pattern went on for about 6 weeks. I started to notice that she wasn't even trying to contact Dana at work anymore. She'd wait until Dana left, then come looking for me. I didn't overthink it. I figured she didn't want to stress Dana out during the workday and knew I was more accessible. Jessica was starting to act like the house was hers too. She wasn't just a guest anymore. She began cooking meals for all of us, doing laundry, even cleaning, which, honestly, helped, because Dana and I were always swamped and couldn't keep up with housework. Jessica would have dinner ready by the time Dana got home, and she'd always ask what I wanted to eat or if I had any dietary preferences. She even did the grocery shopping sometimes, like she was trying to earn her keep. But then things started to get weird. Jessica began staying up late just to wait for me when I got home from meeting up with friends or running errands. I'd walk in, and there she'd be curled up on the couch in her pajamas, ready to talk. She'd launch into how lonely she was or how she couldn't sleep because her mind wouldn't stop replaying everything that had happened with Mark. I'd listen for a bit and then gently suggest she try to get some rest. But she wouldn't let up. She'd keep following me around the house, even when it was obvious I was trying to wind down and get ready for bed. She'd trail me into the kitchen if I went for a glass of water. Once, she even came upstairs and knocked on the bathroom door while I was brushing my teeth. She kept talking to me through the door, thanking me for being there for her, saying how much lighter she felt after our talks. And honestly, that's when it hit me: Jessica was starting to rely on me way too much for emotional support. It felt like she was turning me into her personal therapist, and I started thinking maybe what she really needed was a real counselor or at least a divorce support group. This wasn't something I was equipped to handle. Then came the night everything crossed a line. About 2 months after she moved in, I got back late from drinks with some coworkers. I walked into the kitchen and there she was waiting for me, wearing this silky nightgown that left very little to the imagination. Not something you expect to see from your sister-in-law, especially not in your own home. She had already popped open a bottle of wine and poured 2 glasses. As soon as I stepped in, she handed me one and started in about how grateful she was, how I was so much better than Mark or any guy she'd ever dated. I accepted the wine, mostly out of reflex, but I tried to steer things into safer territory. I asked about her apartment search, if she'd followed up on any job applications. She'd been looking for weeks by then, but there was always an excuse: too expensive, too sketchy a neighborhood, too cramped. I started to wonder if she even wanted to move out or if she was getting a little too comfortable under our roof. But she didn't want to talk about apartments or work. She kept pushing things back to more personal stuff. Every time I said something, she'd laugh and touch my arm. At first I tried to chalk it up to just being friendly, but no, it was more than that. She leaned in too close, brushed up against me when she reached for things, and kept complimenting me, telling me how understanding I was, how much she looked forward to our conversations. After about 20 minutes of that, I said I was calling it a night and started heading for the stairs. But she grabbed my hand and said there was something important she had to tell me. She looked me dead in the eyes, sad, almost tearful, and said spending time with me had made her realize what she was missing in her marriage. Then she dropped the bomb: she had feelings for me. Not just appreciation, real feelings. I pulled my hand away right then and told her she was confused. That what she was feeling wasn't love, it was just emotional fallout from everything with Mark. She was lonely, hurt, and vulnerable, and I was just the guy who happened to be there. She insisted I was wrong. Said she'd been thinking about this for weeks and that it wasn't just some impulsive thing. She claimed she could feel that I had feelings for her too, based on how much time we'd spent together and how kind I'd been. I shut that down quick. I told her that I was married to her sister, that I loved Dana, and that what she was saying was completely out of line. I made it clear this wasn't going anywhere, and she needed to stop thinking about me like that. That's when she started crying. Then she went off about how Dana didn't appreciate me, how she was always working late and barely paid attention to me. That pushed me over the edge. Jessica had no right to comment on my marriage, none at all. I didn't say anything else. I just turned and went upstairs. But that night I barely slept. I kept running the whole thing through my mind, wondering if I should tell Dana right away or wait to see if Jessica came to her senses. Part of me hoped this was just a one-time meltdown and she'd feel embarrassed enough to pretend like it never happened. The next morning, after Dana left for work, Jessica showed up at my office door. She apologized, kind of. Said she was sorry for how it came out, but then she doubled down and told me she still meant every word. She said she'd been up all night thinking about me, that she believed I felt the same way but was just staying loyal to Dana. And then came the kicker: she said if I gave her a chance, she could make me happier than Dana ever had. I told her flat out she was wrong. I said I loved my wife, that I didn't have any romantic feelings for her at all, and if she couldn't respect my marriage, then she had to leave. Period. That's when she turned the whole thing around. She said I was the one who led her on. That I spent so much time talking to her, being kind, listening, and that I'd sent her mixed signals. I told her that I was just trying to be decent, to help out a family member going through a divorce. There were no signals. Nothing I said or did meant anything more than support. She started crying again and said she'd try to get her emotions under control. But then she asked if we could still talk sometimes when she felt overwhelmed. She said I was the only person who actually made her feel sane. I told her that wasn't a good idea anymore. If she needed emotional support, she should talk to Dana or, better yet, get professional help. That's when she snapped. Said I was bailing on her when she needed me most. Said she thought I cared more than that. I told her I did care, but only as Dana's sister. And she was asking me for something I couldn't give her. Then I closed my office door and tried to get back to work, though my head was spinning the entire day. For the next several days, she basically ignored me. If I walked into a room, she'd walk out. Honestly, it was kind of a relief. She was still acting completely normal with Dana, still cooking meals, cleaning the house, but toward me, she was cold and distant. Wouldn't make eye contact. Wouldn't speak unless she had to. Dana started noticing the weird vibe and asked if something was going on between us. I almost told her the truth right then, but I held off. I wanted to give it just a little more time, see if this thing could fizzle out without blowing up our whole family. I was hoping Jessica would realize how inappropriate everything had been. Maybe she'd apologize. Maybe she'd finally take apartment hunting seriously and get out on her own. But instead, she got more passive-aggressive. At dinner, she started making these subtle digs, talking about how some people pretend to care, then play the victim when things get complicated. She'd sigh loudly any time I walked into the room, like my existence was ruining her evening. That was my mistake, not setting firmer boundaries. Because the next weekend, we all went to Dana's parents' place for her dad's birthday. Jessica was acting totally off. She was all over Dana, hugging her, praising her, and then dropping weird comments like, "You're so lucky to have a husband who's so supportive." Then she'd look right at me and say stuff like, "You just never know with men, some of them seem great until they're not." At first, I thought she was just trying to mess with me for rejecting her. But then Dana's mom gave me a look like she could tell something wasn't right. Dana's mom was the first to say something. She looked over at Jessica and asked if she was okay, because she seemed really off. We were at Dana's parents' house for her dad's birthday, same house where they'd been hosting family dinners for years. The whole crew was there, Dana's brother Tom and his girlfriend, some aunts and uncles, about a dozen people packed around the dining table. Dinner had just wrapped up. Dana's dad was uncorking a bottle of wine to celebrate when Jessica suddenly started crying. At first, everyone assumed it had something to do with her divorce, maybe she had an update or had finally found an apartment or a job. But instead, Jessica stood up, wiped her face, and said there was something she needed to get off her chest. She said it was hard to talk about, and her voice cracked like she was about to fall apart. Everyone immediately leaned in, concerned, giving her their full attention. Then she turned and looked directly at me. She said I'd been making her uncomfortable. That while she'd been staying in our house, I had been crossing boundaries, saying inappropriate things, and acting in ways that made her feel unsafe. She claimed she'd tried to keep quiet out of respect for Dana but couldn't handle the pressure anymore. She said she didn't know what else to do. I was frozen. I literally couldn't speak for a few seconds. When I finally found my voice, all I could say was that Jessica was lying. I told everyone that she was the one who had made a move on me, not the other way around. But Jessica started sobbing harder and said I was just trying to flip the story because I'd been caught. She insisted she never would have said anything if I hadn't made it unbearable for her. The room turned ice cold. Everyone was staring at me like I was some kind of predator. Dana's face said everything, she looked completely blindsided. She didn't say a word, just stared between us, like she didn't know who to believe. Jessica kept going. She said I'd complimented her appearance, asked inappropriate questions about her marriage, and touched her in ways that made her uncomfortable. She claimed she tried to brush it off at first because she appreciated having a place to stay, but that it kept escalating. Then she dropped another lie, said I told her Dana didn't understand me, that I was attracted to her, and that I had even tried to kiss her the night before. None of that ever happened. But nobody in that room seemed interested in hearing my side. They were too focused on Jessica, who was crying and looking completely broken. I tried to explain what really happened, that Jessica had been coming to me constantly, confiding in me, and then crossed a serious line. But she kept interrupting, calling me a liar, saying she was scared and knew nobody would believe her. Dana's dad stood up and told me I needed to leave the house. Said I wasn't welcome there anymore. Dana's mom was holding Jessica like she was her wounded daughter, telling her how brave she was for speaking up and how sorry she was that she'd gone through something so awful. Tom, Dana's brother, looked like he wanted to punch me in the face. He kept asking how I could do something like that, how I could take advantage of someone going through a divorce who was vulnerable and staying under my roof. In a matter of minutes, the entire room had turned on me. No one asked for my version. No one wanted to hear it. They saw tears and chose sides. Dana just sat there, silent and stunned, glancing between us like the ground had dropped out from under her. When I tried to talk to her, she told me not to say a word, that we'd talk later, at home. The whole way back, we didn't say a thing. Dead silence. When we walked in the door, Dana went straight upstairs and locked the bedroom door behind her. I crashed on the couch, trying to figure out how everything fell apart so fast. I couldn't sleep. I just kept replaying the night over and over, wondering how Jessica could be so cold, so calculated, so willing to destroy my marriage and my relationship with Dana's entire family, all because I had told her no. The next morning, Dana came downstairs looking completely drained. She said she'd been thinking all night and admitted that, looking back, there had been some things that made her uneasy. She said she remembered how often I had been alone with Jessica. How Jessica always seemed tense around me lately. How she'd wait up for me or hover when Dana wasn't home. Dana said that maybe something really had happened, maybe I didn't mean for it to go too far, but it had made Jessica feel uncomfortable. I tried explaining again. I told her I was only ever trying to support Jessica emotionally through a rough divorce. That was it. Nothing more. But Dana said maybe I had misunderstood Jessica's vulnerability and, without realizing it, taken advantage of it. That pissed me off. I told Dana I knew exactly what had happened. Jessica had made a move, I shut it down, and now she was lying to save face. I said Jessica probably thought that if she could blow up our marriage, maybe I'd become available. Dana said she wanted to believe me. But Jessica seemed genuinely scared and shaken, and she didn't understand why she would invent something so detailed if it wasn't true. She said Jessica gave her specific examples, things I supposedly said, how I touched her, and it all sounded consistent and believable. Meanwhile, I just came across as defensive and desperate. Dana said maybe I had been sending signals I didn't even realize. That maybe I was just being nice and Jessica took it the wrong way. And when I finally shut her down, she felt hurt and decided to protect herself by telling her version before I could tell mine. Dana kept trying to find some middle ground explanation, some way where this could all be a huge misunderstanding. But no matter how she sliced it, every version painted me as the villain. Either I was a creep who couldn't control himself, or I was clueless and careless with my actions. I couldn't believe she was twisting herself in knots trying to justify Jessica's behavior. I told Dana I had been respectful from day one, and that Jessica knew exactly what she was doing when she made up that lie. And now Dana, my own wife, was standing there, giving more weight to her sister's fake story than to her own husband's truth. She said she needed some time and space to think. That maybe I should go stay somewhere else for a while so she could sort everything out. I asked her, point blank, if she really believed I would cheat on her with her own sister. And she just said, I don't know what to believe anymore. That hurt more than anything. So I packed a bag and went to stay with my brother for a few days. Over the next week, I kept calling Dana, trying to talk things through, trying to get her to see that Jessica was lying. But Dana barely responded. Every time we spoke, she said she needed more time to process it all. Meanwhile, Jessica had moved out of our house and back in with Dana's parents. And Dana's entire family was treating me like some kind of predator. Like I'd preyed on a helpless woman going through a divorce. It felt like I'd been dropped into some upside-down version of reality. Nothing made sense anymore. I kept telling the truth, but no one wanted to hear it. Even my own friends started pulling away. I could tell they'd heard the rumors. I could see it in their eyes. The judgment. The second-guessing. The whispers behind my back. All because of one lie. After 2 weeks of silence and cold shoulders, I finally convinced Dana to meet with me in person. I was desperate to talk face to face, hoping that if she could just hear me out without Jessica whispering in her ear, maybe, just maybe, she'd realize how twisted this whole thing really was. I thought that if I laid everything out clearly, without interruptions or distractions, she'd see the truth. But before I could even get halfway through explaining again, she cut me off. Dana said she had spoken to Jessica several more times. Each time, apparently, Jessica had shared more details about things I'd supposedly said and done. Dana told me Jessica claimed I'd been complimenting her looks, asking about her sex life, and touching her shoulder and hand in ways that made her uncomfortable. She said Jessica even recalled specific conversations where I told her that Dana didn't appreciate me, that I was attracted to her, and that I had feelings for her. All of it, every single word, was a lie. I told Dana that. I told her Jessica was making it up from beginning to end. I reminded her that the only physical contact I ever had with Jessica was when she grabbed my hand that night in the kitchen. But Dana wasn't buying it. She told me Jessica seemed too shaken up, too traumatized, to be lying. That since she'd moved out, she'd been having nightmares and panic attacks and was now seeing a therapist to deal with the trauma of what I allegedly put her through. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked Dana how she could just ignore everything she knew about Jessica's history. I brought up all the times Jessica had lied growing up, how she used to sneak out, lie to their parents, stir up drama, but Dana immediately got defensive. She said this wasn't the same, that Jessica wouldn't make up something this serious just to cause problems, and that it wasn't fair of me to drag up things from her teenage years to discredit her now. That's when it hit me: Dana had already made up her mind. Her trust was gone. Nothing I said was going to change anything. I felt the frustration boil over, and I told her she was choosing to believe a manipulative liar over her own husband, a man who had never given her a single reason to doubt his loyalty. Dana broke down in tears. She said she wanted to believe me, but Jessica's story made more sense to her than mine did. That was the moment I realized I'd lost. It didn't matter what the truth was. Dana had already picked her side. The conversation became surreal, like something out of a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. She kept trying to piece together reasonable explanations for how the situation might have gotten misunderstood. But every explanation she came up with only made me out to be a creep or a clueless idiot. Eventually, I told her I was done trying to convince her. I told her she had a choice to make, her sister, or me. And she said she already had made her choice. She told me she thought we should get a divorce. That the trust was broken, and she didn't think our marriage could survive something like this. I moved out the following week. A month later, Dana filed for divorce. Now I'm living in a small one-bedroom apartment, trying to rebuild a life that got ripped out from under me. Jessica? She gets to play the victim. Dana walks away thinking she did the right thing, standing up for her traumatized sister. Meanwhile, I'm the one left picking up the pieces. The divorce has been a total nightmare. Dana's lawyer is using Jessica's accusations to argue that I have a pattern of inappropriate behavior and that Dana deserves the majority of our assets because of the emotional distress I supposedly caused. Her friends, her family, they all see me as some creep who harassed his sister-in-law. People I've known for years won't return my calls. I've lost most of my social circle. I've had to start shopping at new stores, eating at different places, because I keep running into people who look at me like I'm some kind of monster. But what hurts the most is knowing I actually cared about Jessica. I tried to help her. I genuinely wanted to support her through her divorce. And she repaid that kindness by blowing up my life. I keep thinking if I had just shut it all down from the beginning, told her to go talk to Dana instead of me, none of this would have happened. But I never thought it would turn into something like this. I never imagined someone would twist a simple act of family support into something so ugly. So now here I am, 35 years old, divorced, betrayed, and trying to figure out how to trust anyone ever again. Because the person who did this wasn't some stranger. It was family. Someone I let into my home. And I know I didn't do anything wrong. I know Jessica lied. I know she manipulated everything. But none of that matters. Because the people who mattered most to me? They believed her. And now I'm the one left paying the price for a story that was never true. I've thought about trying to prove my innocence. But how do you prove what didn't happen in a private conversation with no witnesses? Even if I could somehow prove she was lying, I doubt it would matter. Dana's convinced herself she made the right decision. And if she ever admitted otherwise, she'd have to accept that she destroyed her own marriage over a lie.